people who are leaders.
Who's the greater the effect? So eventually, no matter what your tolerance, you reach respiratory depression, coma, and death. Buprenorphine gives a strong opioid effect, but at a medium level, it
A young man who and who has tried.
This is a new day. This is a new day. Show up and share. To the people that are back.
We are the lifeguards of tomorrow. We are creating the future by predicting the future.
That the only way you can predict the future is to make it happen.
This is the vision that each one of us can help save ourselves, our family, our friends, our clients, and our patients.
Is to deal with our fellow human beings on this earth with compassion and a recognition that there by the grace of God go I.
So, without further, I am going to turn this podium over to Amy Klumpp from Mahoning County, and you people out there on the internet. We had several of you yesterday. Please pay attention. Please join the fight. And Amy is going to talk to you, and we're going to, one thing we may have to, depending on my next speaker, we may have to take hers in a segment and pick it up at the other end. I'm not sure yet, because I don't know if my speaker is having problems, car problems or anything. But for right now, Amy, I will turn this over to you in your PowerPoint, and I hope to that some of that in some way expresses my gratitude for you being here, these people, the people who are watching online, and more importantly, the disc that we will burn, because there will be hundreds of people who see this later. And what this lady has to say is quality stuff. Thank you.
Good morning. How are you doing today? This is pretty free-flowing, okay? So, I want you to feel like this is interactive. Can we interact with the people that are online or not?
Yeah, they're going to be able to see the PowerPoint.
They can see the PowerPoint. Can they see, can they talk?
See you.
Can they talk?
No.
They can't talk back. That's usually a good thing. Okay. Hi. As Attorney Papa said, my name is Amy Klumpp. Are we up? It's up there? Yeah. Okay. Do I need to be behind this?
What's that?
Do I have to have the mic, or can I just talk?
I don't need that mic, but I think the internet folks do.
Oh, okay. Let me just see something. Okay. Okay. My name is Amy Klumpp. I am from Youngstown, Ohio. For those of you who are around here, know our weather. And we've had...
Would it help if you can see the screen?
It would help very much, yes.
Okay. We can do that in one of two ways. We can either, technicians, we can move this back or move the podium up.
You can move the podium up, might be easier.
Should we just move this back?
I am a licensed social worker. I've been in the field for 32 years, which makes me almost sick to say those words because I don't think I'm that much older than 32. And I have a master's degree in counseling. I should probably have a lot more letters after my name, but that's never been my goal. It's becoming one because people are making me, but I have been a social worker for 32 years. I've worked with different populations from I was a children's services worker, so did general case management through children's services. Then I got in a specialized unit down in Columbus, Ohio, where I worked with, my partner was actually a vice officer from the Columbus Police Department, and we worked with kids involved in juvenile prostitution and victims of child pornography and criminal pedophiles. And so those kids were anywhere from, unfortunately, 4 months old on up to 18. I did that for about 6 to 8 years. That was when it was called child exploitation, and then that word kind of went by the wayside. Today it's called human trafficking, and it's another big issue again, so the pendulum swings. I also have worked with teenagers, the severe behaviorally handicapped is what they used to call them, and did that for about 8 years in the schools and in groups, and then moved to families. I worked with families of high-risk preschoolers, and then came to the drug court in 2005. So I have kind of a vast array of experiences. My primary love is for young people, teenagers, adolescents, early adults, who have issues. And so this, I didn't know it when I interviewed, but it was like a perfect fit. So why drug courts? Why are drug courts an important thing? In 1985, a judge down in, I think it was Dade County, Florida, realized, and my judge, Judge Durkin, was initially he was first I think he was a city prosecutor, then he was the attorney for the Children's Services Board in Mahoning County, then he became a defense attorney, and then I think he was a prosecutor again. But he saw, even in the time that he was in there, the revolving door of people coming through the courts, back and forth, then he started seeing their kids. Now he's seeing their grandkids. He loves me to say that. But you see these same people, same families over and over. I've said we've got a number of famous families in Youngstown. Every area has them that everybody knows. And oftentimes those families are dealing with the issues they are because of substance abuse. I'm going to go ahead to the next one. As Attorney Papa said, we do have 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. Each of those people cost about $31,000 a year, okay? The U.S. incarcerates a greater percent of our population than any other country does. You talk about, there were numbers thrown out over time. It was 1 in 100, and like 1 in 100 people in this country are under some level of supervision or incarcerated. You go to white men, it's 1 in 30. You go to African American males, and it's 1 in 9 who are under some level of supervision or in prison or jail. And those numbers are crazy. In Ohio, we have been around 150% capacity in our prison systems. And we are triple bunking them. We have one facility for women and a number of facilities for men. The men's facilities are triple bunking people. The women's facility is pretty much no longer, enough for all the women that are coming into the system. Ohio made a determination. I think, on a couple of groups, I represent the judge in a group called the Ohio Justice Alliance of Community Corrections, and it's prosecutors, and it's defense attorneys, and it's judges, and probation officers, jails, chiefs of police, all that kind of stuff are represented on this. And the general idea is that we're putting too many people in jail at this point. And it's for legislators, it's the easy thing to say. We need to get these people in jail. Well, it's $31,000 a person, so it's expensive, and there ain't no room. And every time you say this, people will say, oh, just put them all in jail, build more prisons. Prisons cost billions of dollars. So it's not the best idea. So in Ohio, and I think we have a pretty good Angela and I have talked about Pennsylvania and Ohio. I think Pennsylvania is ahead of us as far as subsidizing treatment and getting treatment for people. But I think Ohio judicially and legislatively is pretty well in a good place as far as ahead of the game. With all the overcrowding, they came up with the Ohio House Bill 86, which was an omnibus bill. And part of that bill was looking at sentence reform. And so what they were looking at specifically are low-level nonviolent offenders and how many of those are in prison. And what they proposed is that those people need to be dealt with in their communities. Thank you. And that went into effect a couple years ago, and so the expectation is for judges is that if you have low-level nonviolent offenders, you need to keep them in your community, and you need to provide them as many services through community corrections as you can. Now, if that person can't, go along with those services, then maybe it's time for them to go to prison, but it's kind of a weeding out of getting all of these people sent to prison. Right now, I think this number is low, and it's the one that they always use, so I guess I might be wrong. But 80% of those people currently in prison cite some alcohol and drug problem as their reason for being there. 93% of the offenders are going to be released within a year. So you've got all of these people going in, they have drug and alcohol problems that are typically not thoroughly treated in a prison environment. And then they're going to come back out. They're going to go to the same environments that they were coming from, and they have no treatment available to them on the outside. What's going to happen? They go right back. They relapse, and they go right back. One of the things we're finding, just to kind of this footnote, is that when we have people who've been clean for a while, either 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, especially our heroin addicts, and I first need to say this, I don't know where people are watching from. I am speaking from Mahoning County, Trumbull County, Columbiana County, on the northeastern part of Ohio. That probably is a similar problem as they're seeing in western Pennsylvania, but what we're dealing with and what I'm going to talk about is the drugs we're dealing with may be very different than the drugs you guys are dealing with in other parts of the country. West Coast, I know the whole, mid part and west part of the country is dealing with methamphetamine. Oddly enough, we are not that much here. It's coming, and we've been waiting for it for about 8 years, but we haven't seen the same kind of influx that they have on the west. So I want to kind of verify that we're talking pretty specifically about this area. But when we have people, our primary problem right now is opiate abuse and heroin addiction. And if someone has been out of this, in the system for a while or in treatment, when they come back out and they use, oftentimes they use the same amount that they were using right before they came in. And what we're seeing is a number of overdoses because of that. My position, I work as the drug court coordinator for Mahoning County. It's a felony drug court. It's under Judge John Durkin. He's been doing this since 1997, so about 16 years. And we have gone through this time. We've never had an active death, like an active client die. Last June, unfortunately, we had our first overdose death, and that happened June 5th. We had a graduation this past Wednesday, and we had 9 people prepared to graduate. One of the young women who was doing that was supposed to graduate in September, but the day before she graduated, she overdosed. She did not die, and she remained in the program. So this past Tuesday, we talked to her for her exit interview, and, are you ready this time, and what can we do, and all that kind of stuff. And everything seemed okay, as it did the last time, and learned at 7 o'clock on Wednesday morning that she had overdosed and died prior to her graduation. So it's something that we really take to heart. We worry very much for our people, because if they relapse, the opportunity for overdose is enormous. When they come out, with drug issues, 60 to 80% of those people are going to commit a new crime, whether it be possession of drugs, whether it be theft, misuse of a credit card, deception to obtain prescription drugs, different things, all sorts of different things. So we believe that the system as it is isn't very good. As I said, in 1985, the first drug court was started in Dade County, Florida. The idea is to stop the revolving door, is to stop, really deal with these people in an effective way and make sure that they don't come back into the system. Unless they're regularly supervised by a judge, 60 to 80% of the people are going to drop out of treatment early, and few successfully graduate. This to me, now I'm a social worker, but I'm also a criminal justice person. And I love my treatment people on my team, but I get crazy kind of that we let people, okay, someone's really sick because they're on Vicodin or Percocet and they need to get detoxed from it. And they go in and they detox for a week and they feel better and they're supposed to go to treatment, but they don't go to treatment. They feel better now, so they're okay. Get back into their addiction within a month and 3 months later come back to the door and say, I need detoxed again. That's craziness to me. In my opinion, and this is my opinion, I think there has to be a level of accountability. There has to be something that said that, you know what, you can't do this every 5 minutes. You're going to have to you have to follow through. There has to be something. It's why I like the drug court, because it's about accountability. We have 9 people now on our team. There's the judge, there's me. I coordinate and facilitate the meetings of the teams. We have a probation officer. We have a case manager from one of our agencies who kind of is the main contact for people. We have representatives from Meridian, which is a treatment facility, Neil Kennedy, which is a treatment facility, CCA, which is a community residential facility that is used as a halfway house, but also is used for residential treatment. We have representatives from the mental health venue through Travco Behavioral Health. We're going to have Turning Point Counseling Center come back to the table. So we have a number of people that sit every week and talk about every one of these individuals and talk about how they're doing. And what's different about drug courts is that we meet every week with these people. And so they come in front of the judge on a weekly basis. If something happens in between that time, then they're going to be held accountable that next Wednesday, which is very different from someone that's on probation and they may not see a judge for 3 or 4 months even after they've violated. Drug courts are judicially supervised court dockets that strike the proper balance between the need to protect community safety and the need to improve public health and well-being, between the need for treatment and the need to hold people accountable for their crimes. One of the things Judge Durkin often says is we need to, I think he stole this from a judge up in Michigan, we need to punish the people we're scared of, but we need to treat the people we're mad at. And when we look at the population of the people in drug court, well, let me go forward, I think it's next, so yeah. Drug court eligibility. Let me tell you too, drug courts were like the first kind of diversionary courts. Since that time, because there's so many different social issues that are dealt with, they now have domestic violence courts. They have DUI courts. Those are tough because they're very politically, difficult to deal with, so not a lot of judges want to get involved with that. But there are, municipal drug courts. There are felony drug courts. We have mental health courts for people who have significant mental health problems that have caused them to violate the law. We have on our juvenile court has a treatment court, a mental health court. They have like truancy court. They have a family dependency court. Family dependency courts are for parents who are separated or at risk of being separated from their children because of drug problems, and the idea is reunification or keeping a family together. So there's tons of these different courts now because of the success that drug courts have shown. In our drug court, we run a little bit differently. I'm learning more and more about this because I'm not a lawyer, and I get confused by some of the stuff that I hear, because we run very differently than a lot of courts in our area and probably a lot of courts in the country. There is an association called the National Association of Drug Court Professionals, and they do have a listing. Their goal is to have a drug court in every community. And we have a number of them in Ohio. I think we're up to, probably, of all the different kinds of courts, I think there's 180 different kinds of courts all through the state. But most of them are post-conviction courts. Okay, so they are, they plead guilty to their crime, or they've been found guilty of their crime, and they're put on a level of probation, and part of that probation is to do the drug court. So when they go into their court, it's more about it's less about their charge and it's more about their need at that point. Our court's different. We run as a pre-conviction court, kind of a treatment in lieu of conviction. So people will come in and we look at them prior to them being, their attorneys bring them to us earlier, and we look at them and we have some eligibility requirements. It has to be a lower level felony, 4 and 5 primarily, nonviolent. We do look at 3s. For a long time we were amending burglaries, F2s to F3s. The reason for that is oftentimes they were going into their family members' homes and stuff depended on the situation, and that's very much what we do, and look at each situation individually. We have the robberies, which are shoplifting gone bad. Could be a misdemeanor crime, but if they shove someone on their way out the door, that's become an F2 robbery. So we look at every crime individually. They can have no criminal record of violence, so no assaults, no menacing, that type of thing. No weapons charges or convictions. No pattern or convictions of domestic violence. I had one guy who had 15 different charges against 5 different women, but he never had a conviction. And I'm like, that's a batter. I go, I don't care, if he's never been convicted, because all the women, kind of backed off. So if we see a pattern like that, that's a batter. He's not going to have the opportunity to come in. No crimes relating to kids. That's primarily sexual crimes, abuse kind of crimes. We do, of course, have people that are caught with endangering charges because they brought their kid to a drug house or something like that, and it's kind of a part of the whole problem, so we do look at those charges. No trafficking history, charges, or convictions. We do not need a fox in the hen house, and unfortunately they slip in, but we try very hard to ensure that that's not happening. We have a very close relationship with law enforcement, with our prosecutor, and through our process of getting people in, we kind of determine if that might be an issue or not. Okay, in order to come into the drug court, once you come in, you plead guilty to your crime. And basically what Judge Durkin does at that point is he holds a sentence in abeyance pending their hopeful successful completion of the program. At that point, they are brought in, they meet their probation officer, and they have to sign terms and conditions of probation. So they have a lot of rules that they're under. They also meet with their case manager from an agency called TASC, which is Treatment Alternatives to Street Crime. And at that point, they sign what's called we call it a codaphone. And that's the number they have to call every single morning that they are in the court to see if they have to come in and drop urine that day. Okay, that is our lie detector test, and we, hold very faithful to our urine process. Very obsessed with urine, because they're very, very sneaky. Then they then come to the court. They come to court weekly. These are some of our rules. They do come to court every single week. They go in front of the judge. It's much more casual. One of the things that's important about being a specialty docket, and that's what the drug courts are considered, is that by coming in, they, what is it, the ex parte communication, you guys help me with this. Like the attorney always has to be present when they're speaking, and they waive that right for that so that they don't have to, their attorney doesn't have to appear with them in court every single week, okay? So what ends up happening is they come every week, very casual, not too casual. The deputies don't let it get too casual, but it's a lot more casual than a regular thing. They talk to the judge every week. He gets to know every single one of them. We meet, the rest of the team meets on Tuesday to gather information, and then we meet with the judge Wednesday morning and let him know what's going on. And so he is, and he meets with them. There's certainly a dress code and behavior in court, but we have people who are coming right from work, if they're working their, third shift. And the deputies really try hard to kind of maintain some decorum. Our people are they get very comfortable in the court, sometimes too comfortable, but the deputies try to maintain some level of decorum there. They do call the codephone every single day. Let me tell you about drug testing. This is I think it's my favorite topic because they're very, very sneaky. We have people who are, over time, we have had pregnant men, and we had, because he brought in his girlfriend's urine, so we got to tell him he was going to be a daddy. They had a positive for bovine urine. That's cow pee. Think of the perseverance that took. Go and get that. There's a lot of places now you can get freeze-dried urine online. There's a contraption that's $185. It's called a Wizinator. It's a strap-on penis. It like straps on with Velcro. It's a fake penis. Comes in 4 alluring colors. Only one size, but it looks kind of real, and they're trying to make it look even more real. But there's a tube that goes through, and you can put the clean urine in it, and then that's what you give when you go to your urine drop. So we're very careful to ensure that the urine going into that cup is coming from their bodies. Young ladies will insert things, balloons, pop balloons, put in Visine bottles, take the top off. If they're doing a lot of fidgeting around, we know that there might be a problem. We check color, we check temperature. If someone does insert something into themselves, it's never going to reach their core temperature. So if someone gives us a urine that's 90 degrees, we know that either they're dead or that they've brought their urine in. I had a girl come in, and the girl that dropped the urine brought it to me, and it was gray with dirt in it, and it was cold. And I looked at her and I said, "Really?" And she goes, "No, seriously, that's for me." I said, "Really? Because if this is from you, you've got more problems than just drug problems right now." You're urinating dirt, and that probably isn't good. So we have, there's some, thank you, there's some new things that, not new necessarily, but there's some things that they will do to cleanse their urine. So like they use like cleansers to cleanse their system before they come in. Oftentimes that can create a dilution. For us, a diluted urine is a dirty urine. Sometimes it will be like Mountain Dew green. That's because there's a couple things that they're using. One thing is niacin, which you cannot test for. I have a judge down in Butler County who is a friend of mine who has a lot of kids from my alma mater, Miami University. They're very smart kids. So they all come into court, and they've all got clean urines, but their faces are really flushed, and every now and then they drop because they've taken so much niacin to clean out their urine that they've kind of impacted themselves. So there's tons and tons of ways that they try to kind of beat the system, and it's when I talk at high schools, what we do when they go in. It's a male goes in with a male. There are no hoodies, no purses, no coats. If they need to, they'll make them drop trow. They're looking to make sure, as I said, that what's going into that cup is coming from their body part. So it's kind of keep your humility at the door, because we're going to really check it out. Yes, ma'am?
So those individuals who do come in, and you know that they take it, what is the percentage of those individuals who actually successfully graduate?
We have a lot of people, honestly, we have a lot of people early on that are going to screw up, okay? And it's not in the regular treatment in lieu program. Supposedly, if you louse up one time, you're going to go to prison. But for our program, we have graduated sanctions, which is the norm of drug courts and specialty dockets. The first time they come in, now some people will come in using, and we know that. If they come in using opiates, they're going to have to do either a week in detox, if we can find them a bed, which is very difficult to do, or they're going to spend the week in jail, which is going to be pardon my language, very, very shitty week, because they're going to be sick as hell for a whole week. But they know that. We give them an orientation and tell them what to be prepared for. So we'll have people that, as they come in, have a really difficult time stopping. So the first time that they drop dirty, 3 days in jail. Now, if they're being honest with us and maybe come and tell us versus us finding out, through a test, we may work around their schedule and they can report to jail. We may give them 3 days of the work program, which is a deputy supervised program where they go and they do a work detail. But we're pretty creative, again, very individualized. Second dirty, 5 days in jail. Third dirty, 7 days in jail. And then finally, 10 days in a last chance contract, which means if they do anything else, they're going to be thrown out. Because we firmly believe that oftentimes, in order to do that relapse is a part of recovery. So that's the way that we look at the program. So the urine drops, big deal. They do have meeting requirements, and we do require them to do some level of recovery meetings. Most oftentimes, they're going to be 12-step recovery meetings. We'll have people object to that because they believe that they are religion, God-based, and of course they do have the higher power piece in 12-step meetings. But there's also people, it does not specify a religion or who God is, and basically their higher power is who God is to them. But we'll have people that object to that. There's programs called Smart Recovery. There's stuff online that people can do. So there are different options for people. For people, the Christian faith who don't believe that they're religious-based enough, there's some Christian programs called Celebrate Recovery, and some other churches develop their own recovery programs, so they're allowed to do any of that kind of stuff, but they have to initially start with 3 meetings a week if they're out. Treatment requirements can be anything from intensive outpatient, which is 3 or 4 times a week, 3.5 hours at a time. And then substance abuse and mental health treatment. So if they are identifying mental health needs, our expectation is that we're going to try to help them hook into some mental health treatment. The expectation is an abstinence-only program. So they have to abstain from drugs and alcohol. We test for everything we can. We have an alcohol test. It's not just the breathalyzer that goes back 8 hours. It's part of their urine test, and it goes back 72 to 80 hours. Very sensitive test. There's kind of ways to determine if maybe they just took some NyQuil, which has a lot of alcohol in it, versus if they went out and really banged up, and drank a whole ton. So again, those are things that we deal with. My probation officer and I were talking to someone the other day, and honestly, what we expect from them, I don't know if I could do. And what really impresses me is when you see people who have been in recovery for a long time, and one of the guys that I work with, his wife is in recovery, and I saw her at a store on Monday night, and I was like, oh, I feel so crappy, I just want to go home. And I see her, and she has 2 girls in her car, and she's got about 10 years in recovery now, but she still goes to meetings on a regular basis, picks people up, and I'm thinking, just the commitment, certainly it's to their life, but it's a huge thing. It's a really big deal what these people undertake in order to stay clean. So let's see, where we are, Mr. Papa, because I could stop here,
Oh, I would like to join you at this second.
or, okay.
And have some questions on what you've just discussed, okay?
Okay.
May I share the mic with you?
Sure.
For purposes of the internet and whatnot? Okay, so going back to what we talked about in the beginning, the diversion of people into the court system. Now, I believe, and I offend some sometimes, and sometimes I don't. I'm calling it as I see it right now. I believe that people like Amy Klumpp are in many ways doing jobs that we should be doing. We know that there's about 2,200 drug courts in the country, approximately, right? And we have a wonderful association called the National Association of the Professional Association, the National Association of Drug Court Professionals.
Right.
If you want to Google that, by the way, it's a wonderful organization, National Association of Drug Court Professionals.
NADCP, you could put in.
Yeah, it's like an alphabet soup whenever Amy and I get together. I said, what was it, NAD what? You know.
NADCP.
Anyway, so the Association of Drug Court Professionals is, I believe, as an advocate, doing our job for us. How many times have you criminal attorneys out there either done or witnessed somebody standing at the podium on sentencing day, shifting their weight to the left, to the right, left, right, but not saying anything? Sentence advocacy, I believe, is not only a lost art, it never may have been an art. So my position is that 2,200 out of, how many courts are there in the country? You're a statistic lady. Whenever I ask her statistics, she always has it. But there's a lot of courts. And how many courts do we have in Mahoning County?
Oh my gosh. You know, between the county courts, the municipal courts.
Probate, et cetera.
Probate.
Lots.
Please, domestic relations,
Again, a
juvenile.
lot. Think about it. We're saying there's 2,200 drug courts approximately in the world. So the chances are you're going to be in a place where there is no drug court. You might be in front of the professional disciplinary board for a client. You might be in front of an employer. My ear caught that like that when you said last chance contract. Employers love last chance contracts. What's a last chance contract? Okay, well let's take the average, and I'm going to ask you because you're in this business. You may not know this, but if I have an employee that I don't like, and I'm going to go to Pennsylvania here, we're an at-will state. I think you are too. If you want to fire somebody, you can fire them whenever you want, and if they want to quit, they can quit whenever. At-will, by the way, let me digress for a minute. At-will means that at my will or your will, we can no longer work together. Everybody always wants to emphasize the fact that my employer fired me. He didn't even tell me why. Well, you could quit tomorrow, and you don't need to tell them why. That's called at-will. Okay? Quid pro quo. So in an at-will situation, I decide that I'm going to quit. My employer decides he's going to fire me. Or in a non-at-will, when we have a contract, usually employment contracts are at least 50 pages, and my employer says, I don't want you anymore to be an employee. So the first thing I do is challenge that legally. The next thing I do is I go downtown and I look for unemployment compensation, and that creates at least 2 forums, which means there's a loser in one or both, which means that, pardon me here, which means that there's an appeal, probably by somebody, months and months and months of litigation. So rather than do that, both parties agree that I'm no longer going to abuse drugs or alcohol. I'll sign a last chance employment contract waiving all of that litigation. So we're talking a whole new world now of drug courts. She's dealing in the criminal division. We're talking about professional discipline. And what about the battle over the kids in our divorces? Are our divorces now well past 50%? And now some states are talking about same-sex marriages and whatnot. We'll have more divorces and more custody battles. And the judge doesn't want the custodial parent to be on drugs. We have a contract there. So, Amy, your wonderful concept is available in multiple tiers of the law. And the message we're trying to get with this crowded gym with uncomfortable seats, and yesterday we had a lot of people here and televised, I think, on the news and the news outlet and whatnot, online. The message we're trying to get is that if the medical community works hand in hand with the legal community, then we can help Amy a lot, because we can provide a local, health-centered, individually prescribed treatment plan for what we call extended care, and not have them, but you're actually doing the job of both communities. People like you are actually carrying the ball for the medicals and the legals. They're actually trying to get people into recovery, trying to get them a great program, the best program, and also, so they're doing the job of the lawyer and the doctor. But if we're community leaders and we put the lawyer and the doctor together, and then merely send by iPhone to somebody like Amy the individually prescribed health care plan, which is not just some babysitting or some floss to get somebody out from trouble, but a plan that is calculated with reasonable precision on a case-by-case basis, not one-size-fits-all, especially in medicine, then we have got to the point in time where we actually have the extended care plan made legally binding through the criminal system, through the disciplinary board, through the custody court, through the last chance employment contract. And so the reason why we're in a public school is to get doctors to come here, to get lawyers to come here, to get them to talk and communicate and effectively continue to talk and communicate. And now we bring the best plan to the best person to implement a binding extended care plan. And she does this and has been doing it for years. And I hope you guys don't sue me for plagiarism someday, but you guys do it. And all I'm saying is, each of you advocates are unto yourself a drug court. You know, my wife and I argue sometimes. She says I keep an inflatable podium in the trunk of the car. So if anybody wants to hear a speech, and you shouldn't be laughing, that's starting to reveal your inner thoughts, by the way. So if I want to hear a speech, he'll blow it up and make a speech at a red light. Okay, guilty as charged, okay? Except that this advocacy that you have, it empowers you. You could go into court and have maybe there's an outrageous thing you ever dreamed of saying, but you have a right to say it, and that judge is not going to interrupt you. He might take your head off afterward, right, counselor? But he is not going to interrupt you, generally speaking. So what you need to do is fight this little inner battle, and we're crossing over in our ethical. Part of our job, Amy, is to teach these people an hour of ethics too. But there's an ethical thing that's going on in here too. And I think there's a subtle ethical rule that nobody ever really talks about. The little man on the shoulder who tells you you're afraid that the judge might be mad, or afraid that what you're saying is not in some book, and afraid that it's something that's really neat. I think it'll help my client, but don't say it, they might yell at you, or don't say it, nobody ever heard that before. You got to knock that guy off the shoulder, because that client needs that person. And I'm going to remind all of you that our rule on frivolous, non-frivolous, is 3.1 in your ethical rules. In our state, and it's the same in your state, if a person believes that the law is squarely against him, and he believes in this set of facts that that law should be reversed, modified, or extended, then he has not only a right but a duty to make that argument and at least preserve it for appeal later, even if you never appealed it. But you got to stand up and push back. So if you push back, Amy and these drug court people won't have to do all of our work for us. And we've talked about that. And in places where you have drug courts, say thank you. But by the same token, help her. Be prepared to help her advocate for that client in drug court or in front of the drug court judge. Now, if we could, and if your voice has recovered, this would be a good segue into your handout here if you wanted to just keep on going.
There's a couple of things I want to kind of...
I may have given you some ideas.
Yeah, you have. There's a couple of things I want to piggyback on what you said earlier in regards to... you were talking about the news media, and some feel that some are too... I'm 53, I can't think of words, it's horrible. Some are too liberal, some are too conservative. One of the things that is an awesome thing about drug courts is that they are approved bipartisan. because they do two different things. They are cost effective. You spend much less on a person going through treatment than you would if you sent them to prison. And so the conservatives like that, the fiscal conservatives enjoy that, as well as you're dealing with their social problems, which a more liberal group likes that. Although that's the view of it, unfortunately, funding doesn't follow that. And I know in Ohio, substance abuse funding has, since I've been with the drug court, has been cut 66%. So everything becomes about grants and competitive grants, and you're competing with thousands of other people for 18 national grants or something like that. So it's pretty frustrating. To kind of piggyback on that, when we're talking about how many people have substance abuse problems, because the recovery community is essentially anonymous because of AA, NA, CA, HA, they have Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, they have Marijuana Anonymous now, they have Heroin Anonymous, they have Overeaters Anonymous. I mean, the recovery community is enormous, and but they're also anonymous because you don't say if you're in that program and that kind of thing. There is a new kind of charge going on in the country, and it's called Faces and Voices of Recovery. And basically what these people are saying, and there's a movie, it's called The Anonymous People, and they're kind of screening it all over the country. But it's about what we were talking about as far as the war on drugs. Before there was the war on drugs, there in the 70s, there became a movement of sorts, and one of the founders, I think it was Bill W., and one of the first females in recovery, her name is Madeline Mann, and they went in front of Congress, and there was actually a representative who also was in recovery who discussed his problem, and this was just starting to happen, where it was, even these people who had been anonymous for years were starting to talk about it in a more open way. And so we saw a movement begin. But then when President Reagan came in and we were having so many issues with cocaine and Colombia and all that kind of stuff, and it became the war on drugs, that kind of went to the wayside. So now what you're seeing is kind of a resurgence of that idea that some of the people that are out there that are starting to say who they are. Let me be very clear. The problem with drugs and alcohol is absolutely it is not any one group. And we have had doctors in our program, we have had attorneys in our program, we have had counselors in our program, nurses, just put a respiratory therapist in prison, counseling degrees, as well as kids who are students, who aren't students anymore, thank you. So there is, white, black, young, old. I'll show you some snapshots that we're dealing with now. So it's really important to see that this is so much. Now, in today's society, we see, what's the picture of drug or of addiction? Lindsay Lohan, Tiger Woods, Jesse James. All these people have these different problems who go to rehab and go to these gorgeous places, which are essentially spas, and they go there for like a period of time, and then they come out and they go back right to their regular behavior. That is not recovery. It is not treatment. And what these people are coming out and saying is that we don't want that to be the face of recovery, because it's a joke. And so you have people like, there's people like Eminem is in recovery. Robert Downing Jr. has been in recovery for a long time. Kristen Johnson, who's the real tall chick from Third Rock from the Sun, you know who I'm talking about? She's one of the most vocal people out there has written a book and that kind of stuff. But they're out there now, as well as some, people, medical professionals, that kind of stuff, as well as representatives in the, in the government are coming out. The truth of the matter is that if you put together all of the people in long-term recovery, that's 5 years and over, it would be the largest voting bloc in the country. And suddenly, all of these cuts that are being made because it's an anonymous group of people they're supposed to be helping is going to be very different. Those people are going to have a voice. So it's something that I feel supportive of. We debate people in the rooms of recovery because it's all supposed to be anonymous. So that's still something that's kind of out there. But there's a lot of movement going on in regards to people in addiction and trying to have a greater impact, because it's not about just themselves, it's about the society as a whole. Let's see. Some of the other stuff I was going to talk about I will address later. Now, this part of the presentation is kind of more about it's kind of what I present to kids, but I think to adults it's important because a lot of times we don't know what's out there and we don't know what's going on and we don't know what to look for. There are a lot of really cool programs out there now. There's one that they just did in Youngstown. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight, and it's just for adults because what you do is you come in and it's like a teenager's room and they show you all the different ways and places kids hide stuff. And all the stuff now you can now get at head shops. You can get like all sorts of different things. I don't know if you guys have ever had an opportunity, but you'll look at highlighters, but they're not highlighters. They have screw tops and it's places to put stuff, cans, that have secret compartments in there, and you don't buy just bongs at head shops anymore, apparently. Who knew? So there's all sorts of different things. We talk about trends, and again, I'm talking about our area specifically, but I think that a lot of the trends that we're seeing are being seen a lot of different places. Some of the most new current trends that are happening, my boss, who was here yesterday, just went to a training by a group called Operation Street Smart, and it's a group of deputies from Franklin County, Columbus, Ohio, who kind of are talking about what's current. And it's amazing how often I have to change these slides because there's something new all the time. The e-cigarettes. You're familiar with the e-cigarettes. Everyone's using the e-cigarettes to quit smoking. They now are starting to sell, or they have been selling, THC cartridges. So you can put the THC cartridges into your e-cigarettes, and it's called liquid. So that's something that, and the whole vaporizing thing has become something that is really kind of diabolical. There's no smell, there's no calories. They're taking they're taking the substances and they're vaporizing them. They're now called vaportinis. Have you guys heard of those? Yeah. It's like an alcohol bong, I guess. It's the only way I can describe it. You can get it at bars and stuff, I guess. I haven't seen this stuff yet, but I went online, and so the vaportinis, I saw like a number of places, and they have a special cup and a globe, but it's just vaporized alcohol. So if you want to drink before you go to work, there's no odor that will come. And ladies, there's no calories. So all that, Bethany Frankel came out with Skinny Girl vodka, but now we have actually no calorie vodka at all, which is kind of terrifying, really. Then they have the vaporizing marijuana. Yes.
Have a different effect on the body?
I think it's more intense, actually. Just because.
But that would still get picked up on a vaporizer with a cop could stop you and be able to determine your blood alcohol.
I'm not sure. That's something I need to find out.
Yeah.
Because this is something just heard this week about this kind of stuff. Now, the weed, what they're doing is they're taking it down, the THC down to like almost a liquid level. And there's something new called dabbing, which it's like you get a little tiny bit, but it's so concentrated. It's like the head of a pin, and it zaps you, I guess.
How do you use
That is,
You put it like in water and then drink it? Or?
I've got to find out more about this stuff, because it's like the dabbing we just heard about, the vaporizing I'm just hearing about. Now, they just had the powdered alcohol. Did you hear about this? This was something that they were all ready to come out with, and it's basically Kool-Aid for adults. They have the, vodka, rum, cosmopolitans, limoncello. Pardon me? Powdered form. All you need is water, and it becomes an alcohol. But FDA finally came out and said they were very concerned about getting this into kids' hands and stuff like that, so they kind of nixed it.
It was a product being perpetrated by...
Yeah.
Can I interrupt 1 second? Only to say those are wonderful questions, and I want to make sure that everybody hears them because we don't have you mic'd. And if we could, whenever you ask one of those questions, if we could ask back into the microphone and follow up on that. That's really, in fact, even if we had to repeat a couple of them, because there were really good points that stopped me in my tracks over there. Thank you.
We're talking about the vaporizing, and you asked again, we were talking about as far as, is that going to come up for a police officer if they were stopped? Is that going to come up in their system? Not sure about that. We'll find out. As far as the dabbing, how is that ingested? My boss knows the answer to these things, but I don't. So again, that's something that I need to find out about. Were there other ones with those? Okay. Then we had, now this one's been around for a while, but they're talking about this, is the girls soak tampons in alcohol. And I've heard of this for a while. And then they insert them. And they go to school. And they get loaded because it's going right to their bloodstream. And again, no smell in their breath and stuff like that, or anything. But that's been around for a while, so they called them absolute tampons. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing. They're smart. So those are some current trends. There's been other stuff that we've talked about. Yes?
May I add to that? Real estate, right? Houses for sale and real estate. It's not unusual for people to search for all the neighborhoods whose house is open house that day. First thing they do is ask me, excuse, I need to use your bathroom. Go right to the medicine cabinet and take all the pain medications they can take.
Yeah.
High school kids have these parties where they have a little, through the social media and otherwise, where they'll basically say that on a certain date we're going to have a party. Everybody raids the medicine cabinet of their entire household, and they all bring them together. Just some more things I just heard, and I wanted to chip in there.
They've talked about the farm parties. They're called PHARM, farm parties, where they put all the stuff in a big bowl, and they just grab a handful and down it with some alcohol. There's truth to it. I don't know if it's as popular as, the news media has made it out to be, but it does exist, certainly. Kids are certainly throwing down pills, and we'll talk a little bit more about pills in a minute, that they really have no clue what they're doing with them. Other things that have kind of gone by the wayside because of the law, kind of caught up with them a little bit, is the K2 or the spice. That's the marijuana. It's synthetic marijuana is what it's called, but it's nothing like marijuana. It's like basically they take the marijuana or anything herbal, and then they spray it with this compound. It's a chemical compound, and it really acts more like LSD used to act than it does as marijuana. Had some guys that were using it in one of our facilities, and a stone cold heroin addict took one hit of this stuff and could not walk or talk for about 25 minutes. So it could be very strong. Salvia was the one thing. Miley Cyrus, they put a picture of Miley Cyrus smoking salvia out of a bong in California some time back. That has now been made illegal in most places. But there's an awesome video on YouTube. I have a really weird sense of humor, but it's this one couple that's using salvia, and they both totally react different to it. The girl starts getting into this real kind of LSD kind of thing that we would think of, and she's looking at her hands and she can't talk. The guy becomes like this cat, and he crazed cat, and he's jumping all around the room on top of the furniture. They're in a second floor apartment. He ends up going out the window. it was sort of funny because later on in the video you hear from outside, "Help me!" So he was okay. he just flew out the window. So, I mean, just a lot of this stuff, the big part of a lot of this stuff is we have no clue where it's going to take them down the road. You know, you're talking about chemical compounds that we have no idea what it's doing to the brain because there's not been enough time to study that. Yeah.
The breathalyzer test indicates blood alcohol level.
Correct. Breathalyzer tests indicate blood alcohol level.
So the absolute tampon vodka that you knew.
That would show. Yes. It's harder to, I mean, the behavior is there probably, but the smell, like some of those indicators.
Not exactly.
Yeah. We've heard of the bath salts. Bath salts are not the little jar you get at Bed Bath & Beyond or Bath & Body Works. It is, they come in little packages. I equate them to something that look kind of like a condom package. And they're about $65. Looks like cocaine, used like cocaine. Bath salts are the zombie drug. The one that, you know, people always say that they're eating someone's face off and that kind of stuff. Oddly enough, in, you know, where I'm from, talking to some police officers in Austintown, they did keep getting these two guys that were using them, and oddly, they were always in their underpants and covered in blood. I don't know what it is about that drug or what people do, but apparently they just run amok and are, you know, hurting themselves and that kind of thing. Yes?
May I ask you more of a question on the bath salts? So the bath salts are something that is otherwise legal, right?
No.
So that's why
They're now illegal, and we can test for those.
Okay, now bath salts.
Not like, we're not talking about bath salts you can get at the store for, it's not. Yeah.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about, again, a chemical compound that's put together.
That somebody made. An amateur chemist.
And there are some really smart amateur chemists out there.
I can't tell you how many people think that going to the store and buying bath salts might be what's going on here, but I want to make sure I clarify.
It's going to be very sudsy tasting probably, and it's not going to get you high.
So bath salts is a colloquialism that identifies some homemade hallucinogen.
Right. I mean, it's not, I mean, it's sold, and all these things. The K2...
Okay, but what's it sold in? What form is it illegal if in a legal format?
It used to be legal, and that's why it's trended out, is because it's illegal now.
Right, so
but it used to be legal, and you could buy it at head shops and the quick, you know, the stores, little.
And what was it called, if anything? Bath salts?
No, they had different names for it. They had all different kinds of names for it. If you look it up, it's like, you know, Cloud and da-da-da-da. I mean, they all had, they were really pretty little packages. I used to have that. I probably have it on the end of my thing. I could probably pull it up.
So if we Google Cloud or something like that, or even bath salts.
I would Google bath salts drug.
And that's what I would like you to do, if you could tell them what to Google. Now, that takes us to a very important point. There is something that is still legal over the counter that's also used, and maybe I might be taking you beyond where you want to go, when we're talking about the antihistamines and what.
I had that in here. You know, did I take them out? I think I did.
If you did not, even just a comment or two.
I did. I had a slide where, because when I go to the high schools, you know, and I'm talking to some younger kids, I do health classes. They're freshmen. One of the things that's real big is inhalants. And there's a couple of things I point out. They have the duster, the keyboard cleaners, you know, that have that. Have you guys used that ever? What happens to the can?
It's cold.
The can gets real cold as you use that. And the one guy from Operation Street Smart that I know was telling us that he was talking at a school, and a parent came up to him afterwards and said, you know, had a kid, great kid, athlete, popular, all that kind of stuff. And she went to wake him up one morning. He wasn't getting out of bed. She thought, okay, screwing around with me. She went up into his room, and he had a plastic bag over his head, and she shook him, and a can of duster came out. What they had determined had happened with him is that he was huffing, can's getting real cold. He froze his lungs. So he couldn't breathe anymore, and so that's how he died. The inhalants, even though a lot of younger kids do it, they create some hallucinations, but they also affect people differently anytime they use them. We had 3 girls from our area who were on a traveling softball team, and they were huffing, and the one girl that was driving decides to do it, and she died of a heart attack, hits a tree. So she's gone. One of the girls is paralyzed from her chest down. The other girl kind of came out of it unscathed, but it's just so unpredictable as far as what's going to happen to people. Another thing I always point out to the kids, because they like to talk about Jackass, but there is a very cool video that, if I say Jackass, do you know what I'm talking about? Okay? Jackass is the thing on MTV. Guys love it. My daughter loves it too. She's 19. But if I say Steve-O, do you know who I'm talking about? Do you know who I'm talking? Steve-O's the one that wears the leopard thong all the time. And he is, I mean, he's nuts. He's always getting the most stuff done to him. He puts typically like meat in his underpants and hangs over crocodiles and stuff like that. But they did actually a documentary because what he was doing was because of the way they did Jackass, they taped all their stuff. Well, he had a guy that was following him all the time, everywhere he went. He was the one that showed the police his marijuana, and it was on TV, and the cops actually got in trouble because they didn't do anything to him, and they just got his autograph and stuff like that. He continued. He smoked weed and he did cocaine, but his drug of choice was nitrous. And nitrous is the little canisters you get, perfectly legal. You can get cases of them. The restaurants will get cases because to make whipped cream and stuff, they have the canister and it makes the stuff get foamy, and that's what its purpose is. But he would do this, and they show his apartment, and he has thousands of these canisters all over the floor of his apartment, and he huffs to the point of psychosis. And again, they're videotaping everything he did. He went on Adam Carolla's show and put his leg through a glass table, and they were trying to get him out of there because he was acting so erratically, but at his house he's doing it, and you can see him, watch him talking to voices that he's hearing, to the point where he finally invites all the guys from Jackass over because he's going to commit suicide, and he wants them to be there for it. Yay. And so they're like, what the heck are we going to do with this guy? And they all go over and they meet him at the time that they said, with the thought that if we have to hog tie him, we're going to get him to the hospital. And they ended up taking him to a psych unit, who sent him to a rehab center, who sent him back to a psych unit. All of this still being off and on taped, and finally he goes back to a rehab center. Suddenly the tape machine goes off. Suddenly he starts taking it serious. And I think Steve-O has 4 or 5 years clean now. So still puts meat in his underpants and hangs over crocodiles, but he's doing it sober, which is even weirder. Yes.
Now, whenever we get like Sudafed or something like that,
the cold medicines are...
and we cook that.
What they do is they grind it down. What they're looking for is the dextromethorphan or the DXM. Younger kids typically will do that. It creates hallucination factor.
How does that relate to a meth lab?
That's a different, that's right. The dextromethorphan's different. Dextromethorphan is for the younger kids. The problem with dextromethorphan, for the medication that you take, in order to get high, it takes about, probably 16 pills that they're grinding down and snorting or taking. Each pill has about 30, I think like 650 milligrams of acetaminophen. So if you're taking 16 of them, it's well over 6,000. An overdose of acetaminophen is 3,500 milligrams. So they're destroying their liver. But again, it's where you see these kids coming in and they're like rock solid and they're rocking on their belly and stuff, and they'll see that in the emergency room. That's because of a dextromethorphan overdose. Weird stuff. Then they have When you're talking about the methamphetamine, you're talking about the pseudoephedrine products, that has been hugely impacted by state and federal legislation, that you can't, those things now, all of these things, a lot of these things now you have to go to the pharmacist, you can't just get them, because they used to be able to go in, to Walmart or something and just steal a whole stack of those, and they used to, take those packs out and take the pseudoephedrine products and do it that way, and that's how so many people were making it at home.
Mine and Bruce's travels have taken us into West Virginia and Virginia a couple of times. And we're parroting what we've been told by local attorneys there, that they think they still have a big problem with that because of the rural areas where you could cook it, because that kind of is requiring a cooking.
It's right.
Yeah,
but you can cook it. We had 4 kids that were caught and they were making it in the console of their car.
But what I'm saying is,
it's really amazing what you can do.
It's a lot harder to catch them in these rural areas. And of course, we know that in addition to the drug issue is the flammability of that liquor.
Right. And methamphetamine, when I came on in 2005, it was when we were certain it was going to ingest our area and that it was going to be crazy. And I went to a lot of trainings about it. If you see the faces of meth, they've had those from, I forget the county, something, it's from like Washington, and you'll see just people and how they progress. And methamphetamine is basically, the root of it is poisons, and so when they're using it, it's why there's such a degradation in their teeth and their skin and everything else. They pick because they're feeling it's coming out of their pores, and they'll pick and pick and pick. One of my probation officers went to a training and they said they'll pick and pick and pick, and then when they have an open sore, they'll put some powdered methamphetamine in there so that that goes into their blood system, and then it scabs over, and then they pick the scab and they eat it because it has methamphetamine in it. Lots of different stuff. I am no expert on methamphetamine because it is not something we're dealing with a ton here. We have such an enormous heroin problem here that I think it's turf stuff. So I don't, we certainly in the rural areas, like in our county, we get cases out of Sebring down in Columbiana County. I know Trumbull, Ashtabula, Geauga County, they have a task force called TAG, and they've been dealing a lot with it and going into homes. The danger is it's extremely flammable. Some of the faces of meth, you've got this real pretty girl in the first picture. In the second picture, it looks like her face is melted down because she's been involved in an explosion. And, certainly she's been burned horribly. I remember hearing something about Missouri where 69% of a county was listed as addicted to methamphetamine. So it is... We did have a problem, I think probably still do, in Akron, which is kind of odd because it's an urban area, but it was being used as a diet aid by a lot of the soccer moms because it is speed, and you lose a lot of weight along with your teeth, and so it's not something I know a lot about. I've been to trainings on it. Certainly when they go in and you see it on the news, they put on the entire hazmat outfits in order to deal with it. You'll find out in like real estate when people buy a house and everyone's getting sick and they don't know why, and they find out there was a meth lab in there and it's ingrained in the walls and in the carpet and in the floor. So it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem when they talk about dumping the chemicals they use and impacting water and stuff like that. But I know out west it's horrifying, the issues that they're dealing with. But thank God we don't have I have had maybe 3 people in our program that have been meth users. So let's see, those are those. A couple things that are coming. Have you guys heard the word crocodile? Have you heard about that? When I go to the schools, all the kids believe that crocodile is out there. Crocodile it's kind of like the meth of Russia or Siberia. Very, very poor people in Siberia started cooking this stuff. It's kind of like meth, and then it has a lot of poisons, but one of the things, in Russia, codeine is sold over the counter, so they can get it, and codeine is the base of this stuff, but the stuff that they are making it with, as soon as you put it into your vein, you start seeing your skin get brown. If you put in crocodile into images, like Google Images, it's KROKODIL, it's pretty horrifying. It's like, it breaks the skin open. The people that use it have about a 2-year life expectancy. Yeah.
I mean, even just like for one use?
Well, I think with ongoing use, it's like because what it does is it starts, it's the stuff that's used with the codeine to make it, and it's like it turns your skin brown and hard, and then it cracks, and I mean, some of the pictures, and I don't know how there are some that you can see that are absolutely accurate. Horrible drug house person that, you know, their skin is quite blackened almost and stuff, and yeah, like a 2-year life expectancy for regular use.
Of you online, and we actually had one of our gentlemen, if you want to, at some point in time, you can call on him. He's done some research for you during that little break.
Okay. Who? Bath salts, go.
Cathinone comes from it's an emerging family of drugs containing one or more synthetic chemicals related to cathinone, an amphetamine-like stimulant found naturally in the cat plant. KHAT.
KHAT, which is, they used to suck on cat leaves. I think it's maybe from Africa.
Okay.
But it's an amphetamine. Catamine? Cathinone. And this is where bath salts come from, or derive from. And it's chemical, like, then they chemically...
First for me, I never...
Okay. Yeah, what's crazy is there's some different sites, if you ever want to go into some interesting places. Of course, there's what was the old head one? The old newspaper. I need some, isn't there anyone here, good old head for me? Good old pothead that remembers, what was it? Times, High Times. High Times. Gosh, you guys, you're too young, Chris. And there's also, actually, I was talking to a guy from the DEA, and he shared with me there is a site, it's called Erowid, EROWID.com, and it is a drug user site. Erowid. And it talks about plants, it talks about pills, it talks about experiences people have. They'll say how much they weigh, you know, how much they took, you know, if they had a good trip or a bad trip and stuff like that. Really, there is, if only these people were using their brilliance for good. It's amazing how smart some of the people are that are involved. The K2, which we talked about, the synthetic marijuana, they outlawed it. They changed They changed one small component, and it became K3, so it was sort of ahead of the law. And I don't know if they've done it so that it can, any changes that are made, it can stay ahead of it. But in the court, we test for all of them. We test for bath salts, we test for K2. Some of the stuff you can't test for, like the inhalants. We've got our first inhalant with his drug of choice. There are inhalants, and he was a huffer, and there's no way to test for that. So, because first of all, it's a legal substance. I mean, it's air kind of, and you can't find it. So, we've got him in a residential facility, so we can at least watch him. Sometimes it looks like maybe he's gotten a hold of something, but we're never sure where or how. Because he comes into court and he's like, he ain't right today. Yes.
Question. So, he's in a treatment facility.
Correct.
There are thousands of dollars a week.
Yes.
Is that paid by his insurance?
No, we have, I mean, there's some different things that have happened in the state of Ohio. Our community corrections facility is paid for through the Department of Corrections, through grants and that type of thing. And so that is a free facility for us to utilize. However, it's not always the most appropriate facility. It's a 4 to 6 month program, and it is for people who come from maybe difficult environments, don't have a GED, don't have a job, don't have anywhere to live. So someone like that, we can bring into that environment, stabilize them, get them work, get them, treatment and all that kind of stuff. It's a lower level of treatment, but a higher level of kind of life skills.
And not to suggest that somebody shouldn't be in a facility like that as opposed to prison, but is that more expensive per person per year?
It is not more expensive, and that's what, because you're talking about, it's not a lockdown facility, and so this is why they're trying, community corrections, our community corrections is used for a variety of reasons. We have federal prisoners coming out, that's one unit. You have guys that are on, like, maybe a probationary status because they've been found guilty, so they're sentenced to CCA, and then we have it also as a facility, as kind of a pathway, which is what we use it for. So it's used for a lot of different reasons, but when you get into prisons, you're talking about correctional officers, all the different costs that come with prison. So it is less expensive, and that's why they're really encouraging the use of those kind of facilities, because it is a lot cheaper than a prison system would be. And a lot of times, when we have guys that are going to prison, if they're going and they've already spent 3 months in jail, they may be going to prison for 6 months. And so they're going from one place to another place, and all the paperwork and administrative crap that goes along with that. So that's why they want to keep them kind of near where they are. Where's my little thing? Because I don't like looking at me. Where's my program, my PowerPoint?
Well, she needed her PowerPoint.
Geek, it's me, yeah. Going out, and again, I go with the current drugs of choice because this is what I talk to the kids about, but I think it's really important for adults to know it too. Yes, ma'am.
Question again. Between heroin and methamphetamine, because methamphetamine is going to come in towards the Salem area.
Okay.
Salem still definitely has more of a heroin problem.
Right.
So you were saying that you tend to think that that's because of territory. So the drug kingpin, if you will, has control of that area. Is it also monetary based? So is methamphetamine cheaper than heroin per buzz, if you will, per use?
No, they're probably about the same. And the thing is that what you're dealing with meth is there's still ways to make it, but it's harder to do now. So that ability now, again, because you're from Columbiana County and Ohio is a more rural county than Mahoning County is, for example, or parts are. And so you're going to see more of that in Columbiana County, Upper Trumbull County, than we're seeing in Youngstown. And now you get out to Sebring and that area, Goshen, those areas are going to have.
So really more rural areas tend to go with methamphetamine and more urban areas tend to stick with heroin.
Accessibility-wise, in our area, that's why heroin's so big. It's so available. It's cheap, and it's so there's so much out there.
Okay, so you say it's cheap.
Yes. $10.
$10 for heroin.
$10 for like one shot.
One shot.
So they may be using $200 to $300 a day.
Really?
Yeah. And then, I said, when Philip Seymour Hoffman died, and they found him in his apartment, he had all these prescription bottles and stuff with him, and then he also had, like they said, 50 packs of heroin. Everyone was going, why would he have so much? And I said, because he could. I mean, every heroin addict, it was like dream, like just laying in heroin baggies, little, they call them bindles, they're little tiny, looks like almost like a razor blade side, and they're packed in there, and you get a bunch of bindles. And okay, let's see. We're going to go to alcohol. And the reason I talk about this a lot at high schools is, I'm going to have to follow around. Alcohol today is totally marketed to young women, and I'm talking teenagers. First of all, I drank a lot when I was younger. And when they came out with Mike's Hard Lemonade, I was like, we must stop now, or we're going to have a problem, because that stuff looked so good to me. Well, now everything looks, it's really pretty, I mean, and it's not wine coolers anymore. It's like vodka, vodka coolers and stuff. Vodka is the stuff, and who's selling it? Fergie has her own line from the Black Eyed Peas. P. Diddy has his own line, or he is a big part of, I think, Ciroc. Bethany Frankel has her own line of Skinny Girl vodka. So it's vodka, but it's also dietary. It says keep her thin frame. And the bottles are beautiful. And have you seen the flavors? Tell me flavors you've heard of. Zillions. Chocolate, whipped cream, cotton candy, birthday cake. Go girls, tell me. Iced tea.
Iced tea, it's like
Raspberry, cherry, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, and I have not tasted it because I have abstained now. Is it tasty?
Oh my God, very good.
It's very good. And that's, I mean, it's like Kool-Aid now.
Well, it is, because you can have this iced tea vodka straight. Yeah. And it tastes like iced tea. You literally have no idea that you're drinking.
So it's iced tea vodka, so it's like 70 plus proof.
Yeah.
But it tastes just like iced tea.
Iced tea. And it hits you like straight.
And that's what, I mean, geez, we had to work back in the day. We had to work to get drunk. And now,
You drink really bad beer.
yes, really bad beer. Yeah, 3-2 beer. They used to make fun of me. The girls from Chicago used to make fun of me that we have 3-2 beer here in Ohio.
Yeah. Oh, no, Lucky Lake.
We called one girl 3-2 because she made fun of us so much.
So you can disguise the flavor of the alcohol.
And that's exactly right. Yeah, Harry Buffalo was horrifying, but you drank a lot of it because it tasted like Kool-Aid. Now all you need to do is get a bottle of vodka, put down about half of it, and you're toasted for the night.
Or instead of Mike's Lemonades and all the other ones, because they no longer have...
They don't taste like alcohol anymore. So, and I think that in my brain, that's geared towards young women. Especially with how pretty the bottles are and stuff. They're blue and they have lovely shapes and everything. They're almost artistic. I pulled this picture of this poor young lady off the internet. It was frankly the nicest one I could find. She's passed out cold. Most of them, and when I go to the high schools, I said, do not pass out if your friends are around, and make sure there are no Sharpies in the house, because these girls and guys, they'll pass out and their skirts are up and it says lick me here and arrows, and guys, they're drawing stuff on their face and their stomach, and again, with the social media today, there are no secrets. So, if you Google drunk girls images, it's amazing. And again, the idea, my daughter's 19. She wants to be a cop or a prosecutor. Surprise, surprise. But she's like, there's no way I can do that kind of stuff. I can't risk for my future. My God, she's 19. God bless her heart that she thinks that way. But most kids don't. So that's what you've got. Marijuana, I love to talk about marijuana in the high schools, especially now that Colorado has legalized it. And I always, this is my opinion, and it's not backed by any, it probably is, some of it is backed by some studies, I'm sure. I have guys that come into our court, their drug of choice is marijuana. They're 26. They've been using since they were 13. They use every single day. They are most often not working. They have a number of kids that they're not taking care of. And in my opinion, and I tell the kids this, it sucks every bit of ambition out of them. Now, there are studies that show that regular use of marijuana takes 8 points off your IQ. There are, people go back and forth. My boss is like the queen of marijuana in our place because they're trying to come out in Ohio with actually an amendment that was written by the Ohio Rights Group, in other words, a pro-marijuana group, which would, if it becomes an amendment, and different states need to look at what's coming out in your laws, because a lot of people say, hey, medical marijuana is fine. Okay, and perhaps there are reasonable uses, and I'm not saying there aren't. And we don't get into the fight about whether marijuana is good or bad. At this point in our state, it's illegal. And we have a lot of young people who are smoking a lot of weed. We're staying very tight and close about what the issues are in Colorado. I think yesterday a story came out where a 10-year-old took his dad's marijuana to school and sold it to some friends. And then his friends went home and they got their dad's marijuana, because everybody has marijuana apparently, and they're all selling it to each other, and now they've got 4 10-year-olds for trafficking in marijuana, and you can't possess it unless you're over 21. And the amendment we're talking about impacts schools, impacts businesses, impacts courts as far as testing. An amendment would actually make a pot smoker a protected class, where they could not be tested. It would be against their constitutional rights to be tested. And so these laws they're all very different, and people really need to know what they're talking about when they're talking about them. We had one of our congressmen that was supporting this until he heard, because they just hear parts, and medical marijuana is fine. But that's not what they're talking. It's like any other law. They throw all the other crap in to make it a lot more ambiguous. The amendment in Ohio is incredibly ambiguous. It doesn't even mention a doctor, yet it's supposed to be about medical marijuana. So the one thing I know is that it may not be physically addictive, but it is certainly psychologically addictive. I had a young lady come into our court. She had 3 kids, an abusive boyfriend, and she smoked 7 blunts a day to cope with her life. That's a lot of weed. And so she was in our correctional facility, our community corrections facility, and after 2 weeks, because she was just this lovely, bright, smiling face, the second week she comes in, and she is a slobbering mess. She is in tears, and the judge goes, "What's wrong?" And all of a sudden, she has to deal with life on life's terms, and she doesn't know how to do it. And so you've got these young people who have no idea how to cope with life and the responsibility of life, and when they have to, it really, I have one young lady who was going to graduate on Wednesday, but we had an unfortunate incident with her, and she's like my bright and shining star about it, because she said, "I just feel like I'm so clear-minded, it just feels so different." She's been smoking weed since she was 14. She's 21 years old now. And just to see how excited she is about her life, and she wants to go back to school, and she wants to do this, and she's, got 2 jobs, and all this stuff that she wasn't doing, a year ago. So I'll have that debate with people one-on-one anytime, because, I know what I see anecdotally. Cocaine and crack. Had a big fight with my prosecutor, because he said, we had someone referred, she was an older woman who smoked crack. And she said, "Well, I suggested they just do ILC since it's just crack." Okay, we're dealing so much with opiates and heroin that all of a sudden it's just crack. And it ain't just crack. Crack is still crack, and it's still a horrible, debilitating drug that is out there a lot. Different populations. So, I had to say, I said, crack is cocaine. And cocaine and crack are still bad things. And they're still highly addictive. And crack is horribly addictive. They say frequently, crack is essentially the base form of cocaine. So it's cocaine in its strongest form. And one little rock costs $10 to $20. And again, people are typically smoking $200 to $300 to $400 a day. So they're getting a lot of those rocks. And how many of you can afford that? I can't. So, because of the influx of heroin, and we're also dealing with legislators. In the state of Ohio, they're doing a lot of legislation regarding substances, but they primarily are talking about opiates. And so if you make a law that just deals with opiates, you're not dealing with all of the people who are taking benzodiazepines, and we'll talk more about them, Xanax and Valium, that kind of stuff, or cocaine. So it's like we tend to be knee-jerk, and we can't, honestly, 5-6 years ago, we were talking about methamphetamine because we were projecting a problem. It didn't happen to the degree that we thought it would, or the degree that it's happening in, central and western states. So we have to be cautious about what we need to be talking about alcohol and drugs as a whole, not just any one specific drug, or you're going to be changing that law every 6 months to a year, because it changes. Okay?
Sorry about that.
Now, prescription drugs. This is a huge deal today, and we'll talk more about some statistics and stuff like that. We did talk about farm parties. We did talk about some of the medications that are out there. We talk about, when I go to one of the high schools I go to, I said, what's the drug of choice in this school? Adderall. You guys know what Adderall is? Adderall has been prescribed for a number of years for kids with attention deficit disorder. I worked at the local community mental health center for kids. Most little boys were ADD. Everyone, teachers, doctors, everyone was, boys are different from girls. Hate to say that, but they are, and typically they're more active. And little African American boys are very active compared to little African, American girls. And you have all of these kids who are being identified and medicated. So when you get into the high schools and they're still taking those medications, they're like crazy out there, and now you've got something to sell. You now have a marketable product. We talk about the, we talk about the opiates, and the opiates certainly are something that are an enormous problem. How many of you have ever had surgery? What were you prescribed?
Vicodin and Percocet.
Vicodin and Percocet.
I've taken probably all of them.
Okay. 5 different kinds of...
3 out of my 4 limbs are destroyed.
Okay, so you've taken a lot of different pain medication because of surgeries. Vicodin. Typically, Vicodin, Percocet. Not too many years ago, we had OxyContin. Anyone ever get OxyContin? OxyContin was developed specifically for end-stage cancer. And when it came out, that's specifically what it was being used for. And then the parent company, Purdue Pharma, started marketing it out, and it was going, people with tooth pain were getting OxyContin. The difference between OxyContin and Percocet, because Percocet is oxycodone, and oxycodone, it's like regular release, so you have to take it a number of times during the day. The benefit of OxyContin was that it was slow release, and you could take one and it would last all day. Get a good addict, and what they learned is they could crush it up, and they could shoot it, they could smoke it, or they could snort it, and have all the power of all of that medication in one shot. And that's why OxyContin was so crazy, and it was so addictive. Understand something, back in the day when we were taking the drugs of choice from now I'm 53, so I'm older than probably most of you, but I didn't used to have to say that, but the drugs of choice were alcohol, pot, different kinds of things, different kinds of pills and stuff like that, but they were things that took some time to become a habitual user. With specifically the prescription medications, especially opiates and benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines are Xanax, Valium, Ativan, Klonopin. They're anti-anxiety medications, antidepressant medications. In order to become physically addicted, in other words, your body needs them in order to function okay, 30 days. So if I start playing with opiates, start taking Vicodin, start taking a couple a day, move up to 6 a day, move up to 10 a day, and I've done that, because I like the way it makes me feel. And there are some people that will take Vicodin, it makes them sick. Yeah. There are some people that take Vicodin, feels like heaven. And that's the difference. It's how it clicks into your receptors. But, so you're talking about a drug that you become physically addicted to within 30 days. So now you've been taking them for a while, and then you stop taking them. And now it's not about getting high anymore. It's about not being sick. And so you'll hear drug users talk about chasing their drug, or dope sick. You know, I said oftentimes I wish I could get into their brains and just understand this, because I can't. And then I thank God every day that I can't. But being dope sick is like the flu times a million. It comes from your bones out, is how they describe it. And you vomit, and you tremor, and you hallucinate. And, so it's pretty horrible. Now, we can talk about a person who is a long-term alcoholic or a person who is a long-term benzo user has got to be medically detoxed or they can die. So I had a woman that was, we've only had one person that we've let in the court. She was on Ativan for 24 years, which is craziness in itself. There's a difference between tolerance and addiction. Certainly there are some people take their medication as prescribed, and they've built up a tolerance and a dependence to that drug. And again, if they would try to get off of it, it would certainly be a problem, and they have to be medically taken off of it. On the other hand, addiction is when you're taking it, maybe not prescribed it, you're doing it, you need more and more and more and more. Yes, sir.
Question. Dr. Capretta from Gateway, you were here last year and he was one of our speakers and he was part of our program, taught me something too, the difference between dependency and addictive.
Right, right, that's what we're just saying.
Medical assisted treatment like...
I've got that. Okay, yeah, and that, you know, again, there are people that have been taking certain medications for a very long time, but they're taking them as prescribed. They don't need to up the dosage and that type of thing. We always have a big concern of people that are being prescribed narcotic medications. Doctors get 2 hours of substance abuse training in medical school typically, so it's something that we work very hard to try to communicate with physicians. It's not always an easy thing. The medical board, we have had a couple doctors, and the medical board is probably the easiest on their people as far as getting back into practice. The worst one is the nurses board. You want to go back to practicing as a nurse and you've had a felony charge, it's very tough. We're the least of their problems. They have so much work that they have to do. But the OxyContin, what ended up happening is a number of states sued Purdue Pharma, or I think maybe even criminally charged them. And they never admitted guilt, but they did agree to make payments to a number of states regarding. And so I think Ohio got $19 million, which they put towards an ad campaign to warn people about OxyContin. Didn't put any of it towards treatment. I went crazy, but they did that. Now, they now have to make the medication so it has a coating on it, so it can't be crushed that way, which is good. Now, there are good addicts that really have figured out their way around that, but for the most part, it is not an easy process to do that. So, in April of this year, just now, there's a new medication, and it's 10 times stronger than OxyContin, and it's called Zohydro. Zohydro is a new opiate. And it went in front of the FDA with all of their experience with OxyContin. Zohydro does not have that protective coating, and it is crushable, so they can snort it, and they can shoot it, and they can smoke it, and it was approved by the FDA. So we're waiting to see how many people start dying. And even on their panel, 11 of 13 people on with the FDA said this is a bad thing, we shouldn't do this, yet it still got passed through. So I think that a number of attorney generals, Ohio being one, have approached the FDA about it and their concerns about it. I haven't heard a lot about it yet, but we expect to. So that's a new one coming. Dr. Capretta, who you'll hear from, I think, talks about a drug called Opana, another opiate which is very strong. So there's a lot of stuff out there. Oxycodone is the same as Percocet. Hydrocodone is the same as Vicodin. Adderall, Ritalin are the amphetamines. With the Adderall, just, why are kids taking them? They believe that it helps them focus, and what you'll see typically are higher functioning kids, like the kids that are athletes or the kids that are good students, because they believe it helps them focus and gives them more energy. And so you'll see a lot of kids that are taking the Adderall for that reason. A big problem in colleges, because especially during exam week, kids are taking Adderall like crazy. It also, one of the things that troubles me is it's become kind of a joke. I watch Chelsea Handler, or you watch the Kardashians, and I need a Xanax, I'm stressed out, I need a Xanax, and Vicodin. One of the things when I go to the high schools and I talk to the kids, and we talk about if you have those drugs in your home, we also, okay, what do we do now if a kid has hyperactivity? What do we do for them? We give them a pill. Okay, you have a daughter who has anxiety issues and depression. What do? We give them a pill. We have kids who have pain because of athletic injuries. What do? We give them pills. We have taught our kids that in order to deal successfully with a problem, you take a pill. So our generation has given this gift to the new generation. We had a little girl that grew up with my daughter in September. She overdosed and died from Xanax. They're mixing stuff. We just had an execution in Ohio, and they, the way that they killed this guy was by mixing opiates and benzos. That's what they're using on the street now. It's a lethal combination, but that's what they're using to get high. So the level of prescription medication, and what you have when you're talking about oxys came, the king of the oxys was the 80 milligram oxys. They cost anywhere from $50 to $100 a pill. Wait a second. Yes. So if you were using 3 oxys a day, 4 oxys a day, you're talking about $200 to $400 a day if you were taking a number of them. So it becomes very expensive. That's why we see so many people that end up in the criminal justice system, because they start thieving and they start stealing from their families, and then they start stealing from their neighbors, and then they start going doctor shopping and getting prescription pads and doing all the things that addicts do. But it gets very expensive, and as I said, you have $400 a day? No. So you start doing that, well then you have to come up with a better idea. And so that's how we've gone to heroin. Heroin is cheaper and it's easier to find. And so we have a ton of people who start with prescription drugs. One of the things too, we often talk about gateway drugs to kids. We talk about marijuana, cigarettes even, alcohol. They're not doing that anymore. They're going straight to pills. Why do they go to pills? Because they think they're safe. Their parents tend to have them in the house. One of the things I talk about this. My family had, if you had a cough and bronchitis and you couldn't sleep at night, my stepmom had the greatest cough medicine in the whole world. And it was like, oh, just go get Jules' cough medicine. And we would trade it around. And I finally, a few years back, I looked at it. It's called Vicodin. It had Vicodin in it. Now, me possessing that and using that is a 5th degree felony, because it's not prescribed to me. But we pass pills around in our family like it's no big deal. My daughter went to the Christian high school in Youngstown, and there was a kid, he was a running back, and he wasn't real tall, but he was thick. And he was a big, muscular kid, fast as lightning, and he got sick one night, so his Grammy gave him one of her pills. He was in a coma by 1 a.m. This is a thick kid. And again, she may have been taking those pills for years and had created a tolerance for them, but him taking one nearly killed him. Had another kid who came to the school, his grandma was taking Xanax. Now, his grandma was shorter than me and weighed about half. And had been taking them for years and years, so had built up a tolerance. So James decided he's going to bring these to school. Now James is about 6'6", 350. He's an enormous kid. He was a lineman, wasn't very fast, but he did take up a lot of space. But he brought these Xanax to school and gave 2 of his football buddies some of them too. So they took them and were by like 3rd period, like walking into walls and talking to the walls and I gotta get the 1st period, and they're like, Ryan, it's late, and da-da-da. So I actually brought those kids down to court. But again, these, we've taught kids that pills are safe somehow, and that in fact they're useful, and that's why I think we're having such a problem. We have kids that are athletes. I had the best softball player for Boardman ended up being an oxycodone dealer. I had a kid that did our misdemeanor court, did our felony court, because he blew his knee. They were looking at him as a sophomore for college sports. Had a kid that had a full ride to North Carolina State, little white kid from Liberty, Ohio. He was a point guard, and he had a full ride to North Carolina, but he blew his knee in a pickup game, so he lost his scholarship and ended up for 3 years on roxycodone, which is another opiate. So we're kind of creating the problem and not really ahead of it. So as adults, we really need to know. I said, I get very scared when my daughter gets hurt, and she's been in sports, and I'm always like, no, we're not going to do an opiate. We're going to do something else. She's going to buck up and deal with it. Pain is useful,
Well, it's changed over the last couple of years. I would say like 5 years ago when I had a root canal, I was given Percocet. The last time I had one within the last year, Tylenol. And the idea is that we're hoping the medical community is hearing the concerns, and they're